The road gave up long before she did. It thinned to a scar through the brush, to wheel ruts and puddles, and then to a suggestion that people had ever passed this way. Mira stopped where the birches leaned in close as gossiping aunties and the moss climbed the trunks like old, tired hands. Her breath made a small theater in the cold, and the theater burned away when the wind scraped it to tatters. "All right," she murmured, not to the forest, but to the weight in her chest. "We came to see it. So, see it." Leaves shifted. A crow exploded from a branch with a sound like a snapped violin string, quar. And Mira flinched and laughed because fear and laughter have the same parents. She tugged the strap of her bag, camera, spare batteries, a paperback she never read farther than 3 pages, and took the path the locals whispered about in the diner when they saw her notebook, the woodcutter's track, long overgrown, that led to the house they did not name. The forest closed behind her with a soft shhh, like a curtain. The day was a slow bruise. Above, clouds rested heavy as damp wool. Beneath, the undergrowth sucked at her boots with wet kisses. Time became counting, steps, breaths, the click of her tongue against dry lips. She found the fence by stepping on it. The slats were buried in ferns, rib bones of a thing that had died standing up. Beyond lay a clearing not big enough to be safe, and in the clearing the house hunched with the stubborn dignity of a drowned saint. Its roofline was skewed. One chimney leaned like a crooked finger. Mica glittered in the broken panes. Mira lifted her phone, framed the house, and the camera decided it couldn't focus on all that darkness at once. The screen breathed, blur, sharpen, blur, until she lowered it and let her eyes adjust. The house did not rear or hiss or throw bones at her. It simply waited. She crossed the clearing. In the grass, a child's marble sunk in the mud like a small planet, a rusted coffee tin, a buckle without its belt, a white button glinting like a tooth. The porch steps remembered how to be steps under her weight, but only just. Her boots left wet ghosts as she climbed. Up close, the door was worse. Not because it was nailed shut or hanging open, but because it looked attentive. The wood grain rippled like a listening ear. Mira's skin prickled. She pressed her palm to it, and the wood felt colder than the air, colder than the damp drinking her socks. Her handprint fogged, as if the door were a pane of glass hiding a winter. "You don't scare me," she said in a voice that would have sounded steadier if someone else were there to hear it. The door breathed back. Or the wind sighed through a seam. Or the forest shifted. A dozen reasonable explanations flapped like moths and burned all at once when a latch clicked from the inside. Click. Mira jumped back, heart skittering, the phone slapping against her thigh. The latch had been dead and the bolt driven. She would swear it. The place was meant to be sealed. But the latch hung gentle now, as if just nudged by a careful hand. "Hello." She hated the way the word came out. High, thin, helpful, as if she were the one intruding, which she was. "I'm Mira. She almost said I'm writing a thing, which sounded stupid out loud. "I'm just looking." Somewhere in the house a drip counted. Talk, talk, talk. Another sound, too, so faint she could have imagined it. A single step given and then denied. Her grandmother's voice rose up from childhood like steam from a Sunday pot. "Don't call names in empty places. Something might answer the wrong way." Mira put her hand on the latch and lifted. The door opened with the softness of breath. The smell met her first. Damp rot and old paper and the iron of rust. The sweetness of things closed too long. The house did not blast her with cool air the way outside heat would have promised. It exhaled a chill that felt like a forgotten basement. She flicked on her phone's light. The beam jumped, jittered, then steadied across a hallway papered in a pattern of wheat sheaves that had browned to the color of tea. To her left, a parlor with a sunken sofa and one chair turned politely toward the window as if waiting for an apology. To her right, a dining room where a table was still set with plates swallowed by dust and a fork sunk like a small grave marker. "Hello," she tried again, more ritual than hope. At the far end of the hall, a narrow staircase climbed, and halfway up a black handprint marred the wallpaper where the banister had once been. She lifted the light and froze. The handprint was small, not a man's, not a worker's. The fingers were too long. Something about the house made angles wrong. The corners felt closer than they should be and farther. The ceiling bowed and straightened as she moved. And everywhere, the sound of the drip counting, as if water were trying to decide how many were in the room. "Okay," she whispered, and then, like a dare, "Okay." In the parlor, the books on the shelves had swollen with damp and burst their spines. She pulled one free with a sound like skin departing skin, and a slither of silverfish that made her gasp. The title had eaten itself, letters fuzzed to soup. Between 2 pages someone had pressed a brittle fern frond, a perfect skeletal hand. When she lifted the book, the fern clung and then fell apart midair, raining into itself. Her light found a mirror above the fireplace. The glass had tarnished from the corners inward until the center was a pond of murky brightness. She stepped closer. For a moment, because this is what stories do to us, she expected her reflection to fail to move with her. It moved. It moved exactly. But the room behind her in the mirror was wrong. In the glass, the wallpaper was new, green wheat dancing, the sofa upright and swollen with life, the window dressed. Her reflected self looked very small in a room that wasn't this one. Mira leaned in. No way. She touched the glass. Cold. Her fingertip left no grease, no ghost of heat. In the mirror, behind her, a figure crossed the restored room. Mira swung around with her light slicing the air, but the parlor was toothless and hollow. She snapped her gaze back at the mirror. The figure was gone. Only the wheat swayed a little. Drip, talk, drip, talk. The rhythm had changed. She retreated to the doorway. The dining room offered no comfort. The scent of apples rotted long ago, the stubbornness of chairs that refused to rot fast enough. At the head of the table someone had placed an empty soup bowl upside down, as if covering a moth. Her phone buzzed, no signal. Of course. Batteries 62%. Time. How long had she been inside? The outdoor light had shifted. That bruise of day was going purple around the edges. Upstairs, a soft scuff, like a bare heel turning on wood. Mira, said the house. No. Not possible. She hadn't really heard it with her ears. She had felt it shape itself in her bones, as if someone had breathed her name against a skin she didn't know she had inside her. She swung toward the hall. The staircase waited, the black print halfway up holding the wall as if something had lowered itself around the curve. She should leave. She could leave. She wanted. Her legs performed the little theater of turning. She wanted very much to see the second floor. Okay, she told her lungs. But slowly. The first step sighed. The second clicked like a tooth. She mouthed the numbers as she climbed, as if giving digits to her fear would tidy it. 1, 2, 3. At 7, the black handprint was close enough to see details. It wasn't paint. It wasn't dirt. It wasn't anything she recognized. The edges fuzzed into the wallpaper, like a stain that had learned a shape. At 9, the smell changed to something sugar sour. At the landing, the house was narrower than it should have been. Doors stood with their mouths closed. One to the left, one straight ahead, one to the right where the floor had swollen and buckled. Mira's light licked at hardware that had gone green with neglect. A child's drawing pinned crookedly to the wall with a sewing needle stopped her all the same. Crayons had been pressed hard enough to bruise the paper. A house with too many windows and smoke coming out of the ground instead of the chimney. A stick figure stood outside the door. The figure's head was scribbled over until the paper had nearly torn. In one corner, a sun with no face, just a black circle. Jesus, Mira breathed. Something breathed back directly at her ear. Ha, and a breeze lifted the small hairs on her neck as if a hand had gone combing gently the wrong way. She spun. The hall was a neck, and she was in its throat, and back down at the foot of the stairs the front door was a distant lip. Not funny, she whispered, which felt like the only possible protest against the universe. The left-hand door opened a fraction. A thread of darkness slid out and pooled at her feet. Mira reached. The knob was smooth and wet with condensation. She pushed. The door opened into a bedroom arranged with a dignity that hadn't gotten the memo about rot. Iron bedstead, quilt knotted with little stars, lace curtain that had become a map of moth appetite. On the dresser, a hairbrush piled with hair, as if someone had come close to finishing and then stopped forever. The air was colder here. The window gave onto the clearing. Her breath made a small cloud, and the cloud didn't move even when she did. She raised the light. The quilt wasn't right. Those weren't little stars. Someone had tied the fabric into dozens of small knots and knotted them again until the quilt surface resembled a field of knuckles. "Nope," she told the room. "You can keep your—" Something moved under the bed. It could have been a mouse. It could have been the cheap, comforting thing. The movement was slow, deliberate, the way a person remembers how to breathe after you tell them they forgot. A long sound like cloth being pulled through a closed fist. The smell of sugar grew stronger until her teeth ached. "Mira," said the floorboards. She could feel the syllables through her boot soles. "Who's there?" She hated that she was playing the part. The hairbrush on the dresser slid a centimeter. She saw the motion and did not, at first, admit that she had seen it. Then it slid another centimeter, and this time she heard the soft complaint of its bristles across the wood.
"Stop," she said.
It did, which was almost worse. She crouched against the better advice in every story she'd ever made fun of and tilted the light to look under the bed. There was a shape there, a careful shape. The darkness under the bed had the texture of velvet. Her light soaked in and returned little. What she could see was an outline too long to be a person and too rigid to be an animal, and where its face should have been was a smooth place like the underside of a river rock. The shape unfolded not toward her but away, as if comfortable in its geometry. The bed creaked as if protesting the removal of a familiar weight. The shape slid along the floor to the far side in a motion that could only be called polite. Mira stood without meaning to. She had never known before that the body stands on its own when it wants to run. On the far side of the bed, the shape rose to the height of the mattress. It would not look at her. It had nothing to look with. But she felt the pressure of its attention the way you feel the warmth of a stove with your back. The lace curtain breathed inward as if the house had taken a long, savoring sniff. "Did you?" Myra's mouth was dry. "Did you say my name?" The shape tilted. The sugar smell sweetened. From somewhere in the wall, the drip answered itself. Talk, 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 and then, disturbingly, a second rhythm overlapping it, out of time, like two heartbeats in an exhausted chest. She took a picture because that was what she had come for, because rituals are anchors. The phone's shutter made a foolish, cheerful sound. The flash bleached the room. In that strobe-bright moment, she saw the bed empty, the dresser bare, the curtain new and white, and moving not because of breath but because a little girl's hand had just pulled it aside. Mira blinked, and the room came back to rot. The hairbrush was where it had last stopped. The bed was crowded with knotted stars. The shape beside the bed was gone. Something touched her palm. She didn't think. She grabbed it. It was small and bone-cool, and not a hand and absolutely the shape of wanting. She yanked instinctively, and whatever she had touched let go with a flat pop that made her gorge rise. She stumbled backward, thumped into the dresser, and the hairbrush fell. Hair fanned over the floor like seaweed. The door behind her shut, not slammed, but closed like a careful mother's goodnight. "Open," Mira said, testing the knob. The metal was as smooth as a lullaby, and it would not turn. The curtain stirred. The window latch lifted itself like a shrug. The lower sash crept up with the squeal of a thing misremembering how to be moved. Cold leaked in, and along with the cold came the rain she hadn't known had started.
Tap.
A drop hit the sill.
Tap. Tap.
The rhythm matched neither heartbeat now, and that seemed to offend the house. A tremor moved through the floorboards. A line of dust fell from the ceiling and drew a furrow in the surface of the dresser, like a finger. The shape under the bed answered the rain by moving again. It rolled itself like a carpet toward the window, unspooling into a vertical slenderness the width of the bedpost, the height of a doorway, and nearer in texture to a coat hung to dry than to a body. "Mira," it murmured in the voice of a hand pressed against a window pane. She heard it as a fog on her teeth. "Why me?" she asked, but it wasn't a question. It was a bargain. And the house understood bargains. The rain quickened. Somewhere outside, a branch shuddered and fell with the fat thud of a corpse in a novel. The shape swayed toward the window, and the curtain brushed it and the snag tore with a tiny sound like a thread surrendering. "Please," Mira said, to the door, to the window, to her own lungs. "Please let me out." She felt movement gather in the hallway beyond, the way you can feel a bus coming in your feet before you hear it. The knob volunteered half a turn. That mercy was worse than refusal, because it implied someone was listening closely enough to give it. The window startled fully open. Rain rushed the room with damp fingers. The sugar smell sharpened into something medicinal and old, something boiled with cloves. The shape bent and settled on the sill with the domestic patience of a cat. It did not exit. It sat as if it had always been invited. "Mira," it said again. "Mira." The syllables formed on her skin like gooseflesh, rising letter by letter. And then, down the hall, a second door opened. Footsteps, soft and careful on the wrong beat, approached the bedroom. Each step paused, as if listening for whether she'd moved. The shape turned toward the sound. It lengthened, thinned, became a crease in the air. The footsteps stopped at the threshold. Something on the far side, on the safe side, exhaled the word she had given it when she walked in, the word you tell empty houses by habit to make them less lonely. "Hello." But it wasn't her voice. The knob gave a final little concession, and the door peeled inward by an inch, just enough for the seam of hallway to show. In that seam, in the soft muddied light, something waited that had her height and her posture, and its head was turned toward the window. Mira's phone vibrated in her pocket. A notification appeared in the glow on the dresser. "New device nearby. Mira's phone, Mira. Wants to share." Her own laugh surprised her, short and wet. "No," she told the air, the house, the waiting shape. "No, we're not doing this." The footsteps resumed, closing the last small distance. The shape by the window thickened, almost stood, almost spoke, and the rain, as if it had been holding its breath, came down all at once. The sound flooded the room so completely she could not hear the door open the rest of the way. But she felt it. She felt the temperature change. She felt her name arrive from behind her in a voice that had learned how to be hers by listening too carefully. "Mira." Her candle flame of courage guttered. She turned. What waited in the doorway had her face the way a memory has your face, right from a distance, wrong up close. The eyes were not eyes yet, only the idea of eyes pressed into place by intention. The smile began 2 inches too far to the left and relocated delicately, as if trying on a mirror and finding the silver wanting. It held out its hand with the precision of a hostess. Behind it, further down the hall, something small and patient moved its head to watch. Mira didn't see it. She felt the change in the pressure of attention the way a room feels when one more person arrives. Then not quite her stepped into the room, and the shape by the window stood obediently aside. "You brought the rain," it said, pleased, and the rain complied by drumming the roof in a new rhythm, perfectly matched to the beat of her pulse. The house, which had been listening, smiled all its corners. "Close the window," said not Mira gently, the way a mother would ask a child to mind the draft. "You'll catch your death." Mira's hand moved without instruction toward the sash and stopped inches short. The air between her fingers and the wood was thick as syrup. "No," she said, and though it was a whisper, the house cocked its head as if someone had taught it a new word. Not Mira's smile steadied. "Then let me." It reached past her with a grace she recognized from photographs of herself. Its fingers left little crescents of frost on the glass. The window came down with a decisive thunk that cut the rain to a distant roar. The sugar smell vanished. The medicinal smell remained. The room felt smaller by a fifth. "Better," said not Mira, and the word landed on Mira's shoulder like a light hand, reassuring only if you wanted to be fooled. The shape by the window resumed its crease and sidled toward the bed, where it nested in the knotted stars and became the idea of bedding. "Who are you?" Mira asked. The house answered in its small ways. tick, shiver, settle, but not Mira did the courtesy of speech. "I am what the house keeps for those who come when it rains," it said, and tilted its head to listen to whether the explanation pleased her. "I learn," it added softer. "I like to learn." The phone buzzed. Mirror connected. The mirror above the fireplace in the parlor, not this room's mirrorless wall, reflected the dining room's empty table as if it had eyes for more than one place. In the reflection, a second bowl, upright, waiting, had appeared. "Why me?" Mira asked again, and this time it came out like a child asking, "Am I in trouble?" Not Mira looked delighted to be asked. It touched the wall where the black handprint was, and the wallpaper darkened in the shape of her own palm, fingers a fraction longer than they should have been. "Because you said hello," it said. "And because you came alone. And because you brought your name where it could be heard." It extended its hand again, and the careful smile reached exactly the right place at last, as if it had found the groove. "Come downstairs, Mira," it said with the certainty of the inevitable. "The house is hungry for stories. It wants to know yours while it still belongs to you." The drip stopped, as if waiting to hear what she would choose. Mira swallowed. The hall behind Not Mira widened the smallest degree, and in that widening she felt the presence of the staircase, the open front door, the idea of outside. "All right," she said. It surprised them both. "But I'm walking in front." Not Mira considered. It stepped backward on a rhythm one beat late and offered the corridor. From the bed, the crease of the window shape made a sound like wet linen and settled. Mira stepped into the hall. The air had thickened in a way she knew now, the way a mouth fills with saliva when it anticipates. Downstairs, the house listened to the rain as if to music. And somewhere beneath that, beneath floor and root and water table, something began to climb toward the sound of her footsteps, like a vine finding a trellis in the dark. April 10th, 2025, 23:27. Rain clawed at the windows as Mira descended the staircase, each step groaning underfoot as if the wood begged her not to continue. Behind her, Not Mira followed soundlessly, its presence no louder than a thought. The air smelled faintly of damp ash and something sweeter, like spoiled lilacs. The parlor looked different now. The light had changed, or perhaps there was light where none should be. The fire in the old grate was lit, yet gave no warmth. Instead, the flames shimmered blue and thin, as if burning underwater. Paintings hung where the wallpaper had peeled before, but these were not paintings she had seen. Portraits of people half turned toward the viewer, their faces blurred by motion, as though the painter had captured them mid-breath. Every few seconds one of the faces seemed to twitch, resetting itself with a faint wet click. "Do you see them?" Not Mira whispered, her breath brushing Myra's ear. Mira nodded. "Who are they?" "They were guests," Not Mira said. "The house remembers its guests by their faces. When memory fades, it borrows another." The portrait's eyes gleamed. Mira took a slow step closer to one near the fireplace, a woman in a lace collar. The woman's features were wrong in a way that made Myra's skin crawl, her nose too much like her own, her hair parted exactly as Myra's had been that morning. She reached out a shaking hand, and the woman's painted eyes tracked the movement. Myra's reflection blinked from inside the painting. She stumbled back. Not Mira watched, head tilted in delight.
"See?
The house is learning. It likes you." The blue fire guttered. Shadows flared tall and hungry. The portraits rippled as if breathing through wet canvas. A low hum began somewhere deep beneath the floorboards, a vibration that traveled up through her shoes into her spine. Words formed in that hum, faint as the memory of a dream. "Stay until the face is dry." Mira backed toward the hall, but the doorway had shrunk. Not Mira stood before it now, smiling with borrowed grace.
"Don't rush," she said.
"You'll miss the stories." The nearest painting peeled open like a curtain. Behind the painted skin was not wood or plaster but another room, its depth impossible, its air shimmering with the density of water. Mira could see movement within it, figures pacing, heads bowed, hands brushing against invisible walls. Their mouths moved soundless. She felt her name in their mouths. "Mira, Mira." The syllables pulsed with the rhythm of the rain. Her throat locked. You said they were guests. Guests who stayed too long, said not Mira softly. The house doesn't keep their bodies, it keeps their echoes. It finds new faces to finish their stories. Mira turned to the mirror over the mantel. In its surface, the reflection of the room twisted and jittered, as though something just beneath the glass was trying to break through. Tell me, not Mira said behind her, voice almost kind. What were you looking for when you came here? Everyone comes wanting something. I wanted a story, Mira whispered. A real one. Oh, you'll have one. The words sounded like a promise and a curse. But stories require an ending, and endings require someone to remember them. From the mirror came a single sharp knock. Then another. The rhythm matched the dripping she'd heard before. Talk, talk, talk. Mira stepped closer, compelled. The reflection inside the mirror had stopped mimicking her perfectly. Its smile lingered longer, its eyes too still. The air near the glass trembled with heat. Mira, said the reflection. Trade places. It's warmer here. Not Mira laughed, a small, delighted sound. They like you. Mira raised her hand and touched the mirror. The surface rippled like cold water. For a heartbeat, she saw her reflection reach back, palm to palm. Then a second reflection appeared beside it. Not Mira's face, now perfectly symmetrical, perfectly human. Between them, the blue fire dimmed to ash. The portrait's eyes closed, and the room sighed, content. The mirror began to fog from the inside. Letters appeared, written in condensation. Tell it. What does it want? She whispered. To be remembered, not Mira said. Or, to remember. There isn't much difference anymore. The floorboards beneath her feet pulsed once, like a heartbeat, and a dark stain spread outward from where she stood. She felt the house breathing through her shoes. In the reflection, her other self smiled wider. You should tell it your story before it takes its own. Mira's voice trembled. My story? Yes, said not Mira. How you were lost. How you came here. How the rain found you. Mira began to speak, haltingly at first, then faster. The words spilling out like confession, like rainwater from a full gutter. Each word seemed to lighten her until she realized, too late, that she could see her breath again, not because the room was cold, but because something inside her was leaving with every sentence. The mirror brightened. The reflection leaned closer. Not Mira's voice softened almost lovingly. When you finish your story, you'll understand what the house keeps. Mira faltered mid-sentence. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. The reflection kept speaking, finishing her words. The last syllable left the glass, not her lips. The blue fire went out. The only light now came from the mirror's dull glow, pulsing with her heartbeat. Not Mira stepped beside her. The two of them mirrored perfectly in the glass. See, it whispered. You're learning too. From somewhere deep within the walls came a faint chorus of voices whispering stories, fragments of lives too many to count. Each word a thread, each breath a stitch in a tapestry the house had been weaving for decades. Mira turned from the mirror. Her reflection did not. The parlor began to tilt, walls bending like the edges of a dream. Furniture slid toward the center where the carpet sank like a whirlpool. She staggered, grabbing the edge of the fireplace. The mirror's glow stretched across the ceiling like lightning veins. Stop, she shouted. I'm still here. The chorus quieted. Not Mira touched her shoulder. For now, it said. A sound like a door unsealing echoed from beneath the floor. Thunk, hiss thunk. Not Mira smiled with borrowed calm. It's opening the cellar. That's where the house keeps the rest of its stories. Mira's stomach turned cold. The cellar? Yes, said not Mira, stepping toward the hallway that now stretched impossibly long. Come see how deep the rain goes. Morning never came. Mira woke to the sound of boiling somewhere in the house, a slow, sticky burble. She had fallen asleep in the parlor chair without meaning to, the cold still threaded through her limbs. The fire was out, though a faint warmth hummed beneath the hearthstones, as if the ashes were breathing. Not Mira was gone. The portraits on the walls had turned to face one another, their heads inclined in silent gossip. Every time Mira blinked, one painting shifted again, subtle but undeniable, like pieces on a board playing their own game. The sound of boiling drew her toward the back of the house. She followed it down a narrow hallway lined with glass jars, some cracked, some still sealed. Inside floated things she couldn't name: folded paper, curls of hair, once white feathers steeped to the color of tea. At the end of the hall waited the kitchen. Its smell hit first: vinegar, damp wood, and the faint copper of something cooked too long. Every surface was crowded with jars. Some still bubbled softly. Others pulsed, as if what they contained had learned to breathe through the glass. A table stood in the center, covered with old newspapers. In their yellowed pages, every headline was the same, printed in an impossible font: Mira seen leaving, followed by words that bled into unreadable smears. She stepped closer to a jar on the table. Inside, suspended in brine, was a small paper label that moved like a fish. It read Mira. Her throat closed. Dozens more jars surrounded it, each labeled with a name. Some names were familiar from gravestones she'd seen in town, others she didn't recognize. One jar's liquid was cloudy and restless, as though boiling from within. From the far end of the room came a slow scraping. Something was stirring in the pantry. Mira grabbed the nearest thing that might serve as a weapon, an old iron ladle, and inched toward the noise. The pantry door stood half open. Darkness pooled within. The smell of vinegar intensified until her eyes watered. A voice whispered from behind the door, hoarse but unmistakably hers. "Don't open it yet. It's still making you." Her pulse hammered. "Who's there?" "You," said the voice. The part that didn't finish. Myra's hand trembled on the doorframe. Inside the pantry, she could just make out shapes. Jars stacked floor to ceiling, each glowing faintly with their own light. One on the lowest shelf pulsed like a heartbeat. "Mira," it said in her own tone, distorted by liquid. "Please put the lid back on." The jar's contents shifted. Beneath the brine floated a strip of fabric, the sleeve of her jacket, and within it something that looked like an arm, half-formed, the hand still translucent. She stumbled backward, knocking into the table. Several jars tipped and shattered. Their contents spilled across the floor, names dissolving into puddles of black ink, curls of hair twitching like startled insects. The boiling sound deepened, becoming rhythmic, deliberate. The house exhaled through the stove's iron mouth, releasing a plume of white steam that whispered as it rose. "She's not ready yet." Mira turned and ran for the door, but the kitchen had lengthened. Each step she took stretched the distance, the walls breathing outward like lungs. The shelves bowed, the jars shuddered, and from each one a voice began to hum, a different pitch, rising in awful harmony. "Stop it," she screamed, pressing her hands over her ears. "Stop." The humming cut off, perfectly synchronized. Then, softly, "Pick one." The voice was not Mira's. Mira froze. "Pick what?" "Your name," said the voice, closer now, though she couldn't see its source. "The house keeps too many. Choose which one you'll keep before they all spoil." On the floor, a broken jar rolled to her feet. Its label fluttered against her shoe. It read Mira, a name her mother had once nearly chosen for her before changing it at the last minute. The letters began to blur, the ink running toward her toes. More jars rolled free from the shelves, their labels whispering as they turned. Miri.
Mara.
Rain. Each one's voice was slightly different, a version of her own echo. "I don't understand," she said, breath shallow. "You don't need to understand." Not Mira murmured from somewhere behind her ear. "Just decide. The house wants to know who to keep." The ceiling creaked above her. Drips began to fall, not water this time but vinegar-thick liquid, stinging as it touched her skin. The jars trembled violently, clinking like teeth. "Choose," hissed the chorus. "Before you spoil too." Mira snatched the label Mira, clutching it to her chest. "This one. It's mine." The sound stopped. The room froze. Then, softly, the stove door opened with a sigh. Inside, a pale glow flickered, and something like laughter hummed through the pipes. "Well," said not Mira, stepping out from the pantry at last, her face wet and smiling. "Now it knows what to call you." The jars settled. The dripping slowed. Mira looked at her reflection in one of the surviving glass jars. For a moment she saw herself, trembling, frightened, human. Then the reflection blinked with two sets of eyes. Her stomach twisted. What happens now? Not Mira leaned close, her breath sour-sweet with vinegar. "Now," she whispered, "we go upstairs. The house wants to see what it's keeping." Behind them, the stove door closed, sealing with a hiss like a sigh of satisfaction. The staircase to the attic was hidden behind a narrow door near the end of the upstairs hallway, disguised as part of the wall. Not Mira pressed her palm against it, and the latch released with a sound like lips parting after too long pressed together. A dry draft spilled out, dust and cedar and something faintly sweet, like rot that had forgotten to be foul. The attic stairs were steep, the wood thin as if grown from ribs. Mira followed reluctantly, the beam of her phone's light trembling in her hand. Halfway up, she realized there was no sound from below. The house had gone utterly still, listening. "Why does it want me up here?" Mira whispered. "Because the attic keeps the things that almost happened," not Mira said. "It's where the house stores its futures." The final step creaked, and the attic opened like a throat. Moonlight slipped through cracks in the roof, tracing faint silver lines across the floorboards. Shapes hung from the rafters, draped sheets, but some too small to be furniture. One shifted slightly, its outline too human to ignore. Mira's light caught a face beneath one of the shrouds. The skin was wax-pale and dry, like paper soaked and left to stiffen. Its features were hers again, almost but not quite right. The mouth was open, as though waiting for breath. She staggered back, colliding with another covered form. Beneath the sheet was another face. Younger. Freckled. Her own at 14. Next to it, another older. Tired eyes. Her own, years ahead. Every shape hanging from the rafters was her. Not Mira smiled faintly. "The house likes to prepare." "What are they?" Mira whispered. "Choices. Versions. You could call them drafts." Not Mira stepped past her, brushing her hand over one shrouded shoulder. "Some people make diaries. The house makes copies." The nearest version twitched, the sheet shifting slightly. Mira caught the faintest whisper, dry as old paper. "You shouldn't have said your name." A low groan filled the attic, the sound of wood bending under invisible weight. From the rafters, dust fell in silver motes. The shrouded figures began to sway as though stirred by a breath too slow to belong to wind. Mira's pulse pounded in her temples. "I have to leave." Not Mira turned to her. "You can't. Not yet. It's almost ready to choose which of you stays." "Which of me?" Not Mira nodded toward the far end of the attic. There, in the shadowed corner, something enormous crouched. The light barely reached it, but she saw what looked like a head rising too high to fit, features shifting like wet clay. It had dozens of eyes, each blinking out of sync. The eyes were all hers. "It's hungry for a whole one," Not Mira said softly. "The house only keeps what's finished." The thing in the corner stirred. Boards popped beneath it. Its voice was the hiss of rain through leaves. "Come closer, Mira. I can make you complete." She backed away, tripping over a discarded trunk. Inside, old photographs fluttered loose. Portraits of strangers, but each face bore hints of her own. Her eyes here, her mouth there, assembled like mosaic ghosts. She dropped them and ran for the stairs. Not Mira didn't follow. Her voice came after, calm as a lullaby. "If you run, it will chase the unfinished version." Mira froze at the top of the stairs. "What does that mean?" "Whichever part of you doubts the most. That's the flavor it likes." Behind her, the creature shifted, its many eyes opening wider, the sound of tendons tightening echoing through the beams. She felt it moving, not fast, but inevitably like a tide. She hurled herself down the stairs. The light swung wildly, carving lunatic arcs through the dark. The hallway stretched, warped. The parlor door gaped below, impossibly far away. From above, a dull thud shook dust loose. Then another. The creature was crawling down after her, dragging its unfinished weight. She reached the second-floor landing and turned toward the front door. It was gone. In its place stood not Mira, her expression pitying. "You can't leave through what you entered," she said. "The rain hasn't finished riding you yet." Mira's breathing came sharp and quick. "Then how do I stop it?" "You can't stop a house," not Mira whispered. "But you can confuse it."
How?
"Give it another name." Mira's mind raced. She looked around. The black handprint on the wall, the humming portraits, the stains that pulsed faintly with light. The house was waiting, listening. She swallowed hard. "Then, I'll give it yours." Not Mira's smile faltered. "What?" Mira raised her voice. "This is your story now. You hear me? Your name." The house trembled, beams groaning. The portraits turned their faces. The rain outside fell harder, a wild applause. Not Mira staggered, her form flickering, her outline bleeding into the wallpaper. The creature on the stairs howled, a sound like wind through an open grave. The unfinished mirrors hanging from the rafters began to dissolve, faces softening into shadow. Mira pressed her palms to the floorboards. "Take her," she shouted. "She's the one who called you first." Not Mira's voice fractured, two tones overlapping. "You don't understand. It's the same name." The floor cracked open. The air filled with the reek of damp earth and lightning. Something below answered. A deep, slow inhale. The house exhaled through every nail and beam, a long sigh that smelled of old rain. When Mira looked up, not Mira was gone. Only her shadow remained, burned faintly into the wall like a photograph overexposed. The attic fell silent. But Mira knew the house was still hungry. She could feel it shifting, uncertain, tasting the edges of her name. And above, through the cracks in the ceiling, the rain began to whisper her story back to her, one word at a time. The rain had not stopped. It had only grown more careful. Mira sat in the parlor, where the portraits no longer faced one another.
They all looked at her now.
The air trembled with a rhythm that wasn't thunder, but something slower, almost like breathing. Every few seconds, the house flexed, boards sighing, nails popping softly, as if it were learning the shape of its new silence. She was alone. Or nearly. In the window's reflection, another version of her sat slightly out of sync, head tilted, lips moving a heartbeat late. The two images watched each other through the glass as rain traced words across the panes. Letters formed and slipped away before she could read them all. Mira stayed. Mira spoke. Mira? Each drop rewrote the sentence. From somewhere above, the roof moaned. A trickle of water ran down the walls, tracing veins through the wallpaper. When it reached the floor, it pooled around Mira's boots and began to whisper. "You gave the house a story," the water said in a voice that was her own. "Now it wants to finish it," she whispered back. "I didn't mean to. But you did. Houses remember everything, even mistakes." The rain outside grew heavier. Through the blur of the window, Mira could see the outline of the forest, dark trunks bending as if straining to hear. Lightning flashed, and for a moment she saw that the trees, too, had faces carved into their bark, mouths open in the same voiceless song as the carvings in the cellar. She stood. The floor responded under her feet like flesh, warm, elastic, alive. The whispering water crawled toward the front door, forming a thin stream that traced the outline of its hinges. It wanted her to follow. Mira hesitated. "If I go out there, will it let me leave?" The house answered with a sound like laughter hidden in the walls. The portraits trembled. Dust sifted down like ash. She took a step, then another. The floor cooled beneath her soles, as though approving. When she reached the door, her reflection in the glass was already outside, standing in the rain, hand raised in mirror greeting. Lightning again, brief, white, merciless. The reflection smiled. "Come on," it said through the thunder, though no sound carried. "You've earned it." Mira opened the door. Rain rushed in, but not the cold, punishing kind. It felt thick, almost warm, humming faintly like a chorus. It clung to her skin, soaked her clothes, and the whispering in her ears became words. Her own voice multiplied and layered until it filled her head. The house never wanted to keep you, Mira. It only wanted to learn how to end. She stepped into the downpour. The air outside was blurred, unreal. Every raindrop struck with the soft pressure of a fingertip. Each one whispered her name. Behind her, the house sighed, releasing a final breath through its eaves. The front door closed on its own, and the lights in the windows flickered out one by one, like eyes going gently shut. She walked into the forest, the rain guiding her path. The trees leaned aside to make room. Beneath the canopy, puddles shivered and whispered, and in every reflection she passed, she saw the same face. Not hers, not Mira's, but a calm amalgam of both. The voice of the rain softened to a murmur. Stories don't die, Mira. They change houses. When she looked back, the clearing was empty. The house was gone. Only the sound of rain remained, falling onto soil that steamed faintly in the dawn. She kept walking until she reached the edge of the forest. The rain followed her only so far, stopping neatly at the tree line as if tethered to the memory of the house. She turned once more and listened. A final drop struck her shoulder. It whispered, "Thank you." And for the first time since the door had opened, the silence that followed did not feel like waiting.